Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be in this wonderful world of ours. It is my pleasure to introduce you and welcome you to the Rooted in Community, the Infrastructure, Power, and Collective Giving webinar, where we'll be sharing out the findings from our latest research that was done collectively between Colmena Consulting, Philanthropy Together, and my home in the Dorothy Johnson Center for Philanthropy at Grand Valley State University. I see people, they're well experienced in Philanthropy Together webinars. They're popping in greetings and where they're tuning in from. So please keep that up. We always love to see where people are from and to hear what you have to say. So it's my duty to kind of get things started here, and I was told to keep it moving because I do ramble, as you can see already. But to start off, we want to thank the people that funded this work and made it possible for us as sponsors. The Gates Foundation, Fidelity Charitable's Catalyst Fund, the Lodestar Foundation, and the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. They've been very generous, and we're very grateful for their support of this work. But behind them and the most actively involved people, especially with Philanthropy Together, are the Network Brain Trust. And as you can see there, just about every network of giving circles, collective giving groups is represented in that Brain Trust. And we relied heavily on them for their involvement, for their promotion, for sharing contacts. And we're very grateful for the support that they've given this project all the way through these last few years. So as I said at the beginning, this is our third, and some people say final. I'm not so sure, but certainly the third and final installment of this round of research. We started a couple of years ago within Abundance, where we documented the growth of the sector, and then we moved to Patterns in the Tapestry to understand the different forms and shapes that collective giving takes. And now Rooted in Community, where our focus has shifted to the infrastructure that powers collective giving. It's often invisible, but that doesn't make it any less important. And we'd like to share why we think this paper matters right now. And I think it's probably the reason that most of you have decided to spend some time with us on this webinar. We feel like collective giving is the best response that we have to this moment in time. We face a lot of challenges. Our nonprofit sector and civil society leaders are under a lot of duress, facing many challenges. And we feel that collective giving powers trust, connection, and facilitates shared urgency, facilitates shared action to face urgency. So this report, we hope it helps to inform strategy and action for leaders, for funders, and advocates that are committed to strengthening the infrastructure that enables collective giving. And so that it remains rooted in community. And with that, I will pass it off to my esteemed colleague, research partner, sister from another mister, Adriana Loson-Ceballos.
Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you all for joining us today. We have, there's so many friendly faces in the room, I just can't stop smiling. And so when we got together and we thought, what conversation can we all have that can offer support to guide us in these next phases of compounding crises and opportunities, as Michael said. What became clear to us is that we wanted to leave this conversation feeling that we all understand that collective giving is legitimate and it's a growing movement that is rooted in our community's power, in our community's generosity, that it promotes participation and that it fosters belonging. We want, or we hope, that this paper helps us to see that this movement not only matters now more than ever, but that it also gives greater visibility and hopefully investment to all the organizations behind the movement. And we hope that today's conversation brings the ecosystem into view so that participants leave with clearer language, some evidence, and some examples to make the case. We know that it's always the invisible that we do, and yet it is the essential work of helping to grow this movement. So with that, I'd like to move on to the next slide. to say, what is collective giving? I know that in some ways we're preaching to the choir, especially with the names that I saw, but not everyone who's going to watch this webinar in the future is going to be part of the choir. And so we felt it was important to start there. Collective giving is something that involves a group of individuals that pool their resources, their knowledge, their networks to support something that they choose as a group. And it typically involves some sort of democratic decision making, what Michael and I like to call the schools of democracy, lowercase d, community connections, learning, engagement, all of that is aimed at achieving some amplified impact, something that allows us to do more together than we could alone. And this is central to the practice of the 5 T's that we often use in philanthropy of time, talent, treasure, and testimony. Let's keep going. So the moment that we're in, Michael started to allude to this, but we are moving in a world that is increasingly polarized. There's concentration of wealth, there's isolation, there's missing voices, there's anonymity in a lot of the things that are going on behind the scenes, there's polarization, and there's missing data. And I think that the antidote that collective giving offers is the opposite of that. It is this ability to think about wealth abundance, to think about community, to think about representative philanthropy, to think about accountability, and more. So let's keep going. And this isn't just a theory for us. Like, these are some of the findings, which I won't read all, but they are from the In Abundance report that we did, that we actually found that there was evidence to back up some of this data. And so we'll keep going in service of time, but I want to name that this is a movement that, thanks for going to the next slide. There we go. That between 2017 and 2023, we found moved $3.1 billion plus. I think that that's really important because, one, I have lost so much eyesight trying to do this census math behind the scenes, but we often think that this is, oh, it's just a giving circle here or there, or it's just my network. But the reality of the situation is it is a movement that just in the United States has moved over 370,000 individuals with nearly 4,000 groups across the country. And that is projected to double in the time that we're in. And so when we think about this as a movement, we really have to think about the work that it takes to mobilize this many people, this many groups, and this much money. So what is the infrastructure? What does it take to move this movement? What our research found was this ecosystem of different actors, including host organizations that have giving circles or different types of collective giving groups, networks of collective giving groups, platforms, researchers like yours truly, and of course, the field catalysts. And you may have noticed that we very strategically picked people on this call to represent each one of these. And so with that, I would love to move on to introduce our amazing speakers for the day. And so each speaker is going to briefly locate themselves in the ecosystem and will share where they sit, what their role helps to make possible, and how their role connects to the wider web. So with that, Aiden, I would love to pass it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Adriana. I really appreciate being here. My name is Aiden Ramirez, and I am a development advisor for our Philanthropy for All project here at the Arizona Community Foundation. That's what we call our 10 giving circles that we have here at the Arizona Community Foundation that are identity-based. And part of my role is not just the administrative work here at the Community Foundation to support our giving circles, but it's also to create those relationships, provide some strategic support to our giving circles. Sometimes that means a third-party review of certain policies they want to create or changes that they want to do. but it's also to make sure that they're community rooted. And so that whether that's connecting them to other giving circles here within the Arizona Community Foundation or some of the other support networks that we'll hear about later on. My role is to make sure that our giving circles feel supported, that all the administrative pieces get completed, and again, just helping with those relationships and stability. So, we provide that anchor for giving support or for collective giving in our foundation. But I know we have our next speaker who will speak on the platforms that help with participation and coordination. So, Emily, would love to bring you into that conversation.
Thank you so much, Aiden. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Rasmussen. I'm the founder and CEO of Grapevine, and I'm here to represent the platform perspective. We see platforms as critical infrastructure that really helps to reduce friction for giving, communication, participation, coordination, all of the different pieces of the actual doing part of the Giving Circle model. Grapevine is actually the only platform dedicated to the Giving Circle model. And it's a place where you can go to easily find and learn more about and join a Giving Circle, or to start your own in just a couple of minutes. We have free tools and resources that provide a kind of all-in-one solution for giving circles where members can collect donations, issue tax receipts, grant funds to nonprofits. So all of the donation and granting pieces of the model, as well as get a community space with features that facilitate the kind of connection and collaboration that are really core to this model and very unique to this model, right? Including group and one-on-one messaging, nonprofit nomination and voting features, event planning, and even nonprofit thank you notes and updates. So that's where we sit in the overall ecosystem. And to date, we now host about 1,200 active giving circles across the country. We have over 100,000 members, and more than $60 million has been moved to almost 9,000 nonprofits now across the country through the Grapevine platform. So that's me, and that's Grapevine representing the platform perspective. And I know we want to bring in some of our other speakers, so I will pass it over to Sierra to talk more about networks.
Thank you, Emily. Hello, everyone. I'm Sierra Garcia. I'm the CEO of Social Venture Partners International. And Social Venture Partners is a network that connects 29 different communities in 4 countries. And we have more than 2,100 members. We call them our donor partners, and we support more than 580 nonprofits worldwide. So when we talk about a network, I want you to think of us as the connective tissue that connects each of these giving circles, or in our case, SVP affiliates. And as a network, we have 3 primary roles. We align our affiliates around a shared model, shared values, shared principles. We strengthen our affiliates through shared resources and innovations, and we grow the movement by sharing branding, marketing, and awareness. So by doing this, we're creating the environment where our affiliates thrive, where our members increase their giving, and they do so through the best philanthropic practices, and our nonprofit partners scale their impact. So networks really help connect the field across places or identities, and field catalysts help build shared language, strategy, visibility, and coordination. So I'm going to pass off to Isis to share more about that.
Thank you so much, Sierra. So lovely to be here with all of you today. Philanthropy Together is a field catalyst for collective giving. We see a world where collective giving is everywhere, where so many more people are able to be a part of this movement and this model. The work that we do is really twofold. On the one hand, we are the connective tissue for all of the various actors that are participating today, and so many of those in the chat. We do a lot of storytelling and convening spaces and trainings. And then on the other side, we're really trying to catalyze this movement to be bigger and bolder and better in practice. And so that might be new research in this work. That might be really being the mouthpiece for this movement over time and across the globe. We do tons of different speaking engagements every single year. And we're so excited to be one of the engines powering this movement for the long term. I'd love to bring in my fellow researchers on this work, Adriana and Michael, to keep us going. This is one of the efforts that Philanthropy Philanthropy Together does a lot is helping to steward the research of this movement so that we're able to understand what's happening right now and where this work needs to go. Michael?
Isis, thanks very much. As the researchers, we get to bear witness to the amazing energy, enthusiasm, and change that is generated by the people that participate in those various aspects of the infrastructure for the movement. And I know for me, it's been quite a learning experience, and it's been part of my head and part of my heart since I came to the Johnson Center a few years ago. And for us to give numbers, to give an analysis of what's happening, we think is a real value added. Uh, Numbers like the ones that Adriana shared about the growth of the movement, they get the attention of media. And when we published in Abundance a few years ago, there's an amazing amount of coverage from unexpected corners of the media world to highlight the movement and to give it more visibility. So I think one of our main contributions is to be able to move from anecdote and examples to more systematic storytelling and an analysis of what's happening in the field and give that scope and give that depth. For example, we surveyed members of Giving Circles and found out the motivations they have for joining, and that's what Adriana alluded to, wanting to have a greater impact, wanting to connect with neighbors, as well as the impact that participating had on them. So things like feeling that they, as individuals and as a group, had a greater ability to impact the well-being of their communities. They had a greater sense of urgency, of agency as well. And so that's where I think we land as researchers. I'd also, just as a quick footnote, would add, as a result of this research, I became a member of the Giving Circle. I felt embarrassed by what I was learning about, and I wasn't a part of it. So I joined Guys Who Give here in Grand Rapids a couple years ago so that I could be part of this movement. Adriana, what do you need to add to what I just said?
I mean, not much other than a general frustration that my camera isn't working and that it is the power of peer pressure that you finally joined a Giving Circle. We couldn't believe that it took you so long. So apologies for my camera behind the scenes. I'm trying to fix it. But I will say that the thing that I really appreciate about the way that we've all interconnected the roles that infrastructure plays is that we're learning together. We're building a narrative of how we can be talking about our impact, how we can be scaling and cross-pollinating opportunities to learn from one another so that we aren't reinventing the wheel. And I think it's important to have evidence that allows us to move beyond hypotheses and anecdotes to be able to share a collective knowledge as to why what we're doing matters. The fact that we're able to have figures like we did earlier, I think is incredibly important to the validity and the legitimacy behind the work that is taking place across the country. So with that, thank you all for sharing a little piece of the pie. And I think you can start to see how interconnected this all is. I would love to move on to telling you a little bit about the findings. We're going to go into them more deeply, but what I wanted to say here is that what we saw was that infrastructure is able to transform something that is local into something that is durable, equitable, and much larger in scale. And that's incredibly hard to do when you're trying to think about things that happen in your local community. But you will find me saying something like in a small town in Madrid, well, it worked in Spain, well, it worked in Pittsburgh, or it works in Mississippi, or it works in somewhere else. Like, these are ideas that are taking place locally that are providing regional, national, and international inspiration around the world. And so that's something that we found writ large. But it does that in three specific ways. The first is that infrastructure connects and strengthens the collective giving ecosystem. So all of the people on this call know each other, right? And that's not an accident. We are able to tell each other how we're trying to think of ways to support each other's work. And the other thing is that infrastructure accelerates growth and it builds legitimacy. And then finally, it is something that expands access and it broadens participation. And so we'll go through these shortly, but I just want to name that we're going to start with number 2. We're doing these a little bit out of order, but we wanted to make sure that they flowed a little bit better in terms of the conversation we're having today. So with that, starting with finding number 2 on the next slide, I would say that it accelerates growth and builds legitimacy in 3 different ways. The first is that it builds field knowledge, right? So we have research. It demonstrates the impact and it informs all of our strategies. We know that the field exists now and we know how it works. It also amplifies the visibility and reshapes philanthropy's public narrative. So people are actively changing how they see themselves as change agents, as philanthropists with a different connotation to what it means. But it's also showing that it also expands the capacity through field catalysts that scale resources and coordinations. Philanthropy Together is amazing in so many different ways. And one of them is this capacity to share resources and to share examples and to coordinate brain trust and all these different things that they do that allow us to be able to scale at a massive level. So with that, I would love to invite Michael in to speak about this first sub-finding that comes with field knowledge.
So for us, the challenge of trying to document and understand the scope and size and shape of the field was an incredibly enriching exercise. Adriana's had to change the prescription on her glasses as a result of poring over so many numbers and so many spreadsheets and so many websites to try to get at that census information. But without those numbers, we don't really know the influence and the impact and the number of people and the number of communities that are being reached by this movement. And so for us to do that systematically builds gives folks like Philanthropy Together and others the ability to tell stories that are not just off the top of their heads, but can really give a scope of the reach of the movement throughout the United States and indeed throughout the world. And with that, I will pass it to Isis to talk about the next sub-finding.
Thank you, Michael. I think, Adriana, this one's you, right?
You go ahead and I will be the next one, Isis.
Okay, fantastic. Wonderful. Hi again, everybody. So what even are field catalysts? I think this is a term that some folks might know, others might not. Bridgespan Research defines it as folks that are building networks, fostering collaboration, identifying the systemic barriers that are preventing progress in any given field, developing promising practices to push that forward, generating research and shifting narratives. And I would say those are all of the things that we try to do at Philanthropy Together. And when we came into this work, it was a co-design effort by more than 100 folks that really spanned all of those different categories of infrastructure. I think we all know in so many of these fields who these actors are without even needing the formal research. Like if you're in the field and on the ground, you know that you need the networks and the tech platforms and the actual host organizations and community foundations to come together and do this work. And one of the key things that everyone was saying is like, we know that this model works. We know that it has such impact on the people that are a part of it. We know that it moves more money. And we had research from 2016 to back part of that up. What we don't all have is a bigger, bolder mouthpiece to be able to tell that story at a much larger level. And so that's one of the places that Philanthropy Together has really tried to step into. And this finding around amplifying the visibility of collective giving is really about trying to reshape the public narrative of what people understand philanthropy to be, who is considered a philanthropist, how we actually do giving. This doesn't just need to be one individual in a silo with their own strategy making a decision. This can be something that's rooted rooted in the collective, and it can be something that actually shifts where dollars go at the end of that day. And so everything from our CEO Sara Lomalin's TED Talk in 2021 that hopefully many of you have seen, that's a great 13-minute quick snapshot for anyone who's trying to help expand their understanding of this from an easy capacity to be able to watch that. And our teams do about 40 to 50 speaking engagements a year, really trying to amplify this work alongside a lot of media efforts and other pieces. And I would say that this is never about Philanthropy Together, trying to put our name out there. We've been able to reach almost 3 billion media impressions for this work about the model itself, about giving circles, about collective giving, about what this work looks like in practice. And so that's really important to us to be that sort of booster for the field, and then everyone else amplifying many of those voices. I'll pass it to you,
Amazing.
Adriana.
Thank you so much, Isis. And I think that's a perfect segue for this, because field catalysts are not like Philanthropy Together. You're helping to make the movement more visible, more coordinated, more supported. And that is possible because you expand the capacity of local groups, and it allows us to scale the resources that we come up with, but also the language that we use, how we can coordinate across the field. I mean, I really do think of this webinar speakers as an example, right? Like here we have a network, we have a host organization, we have research, we have platforms, we have field catalysts. Like we all are constantly doing things together in service of our multiple missions, not in competition with one another, but with a deep understanding that there is enough space in this movement for all of us, and that's incredibly important. And that is a result of how field catalysts are doing that, right? And I think that it's really important that we also name that field catalysts have helped us to see that this is a movement in the first place. Like, thank you for sharing that blog, Michael, from the history of Philanthropy Together. You know, 10 years ago, we were like, wow, this is starting to like feel like I'm bumping into giving circles everywhere I go. But it wasn't until we took a concerted effort to see the growth over time, to see and learn from one another, that we realized just the magnitude of what we were doing across the country and around the world. And so I think that this is incredibly important when we think about a philanthropic landscape that is often focused on large donor giving and wealth concentration, to say this is the exact opposite. This is about participation. This is about relationships. This is about learning. This is about shared power. It's more than a mechanism. It's about transforming how we see our role in society and how we work with others to create social change. And so with that, I will go ahead and ask Elisa to go to the next slide, because infrastructure builds knowledge, legitimacy, and visibility, but it also supports the growth of the movement. And so that brings us to our amazing hosts, platforms, and networks. I will say that each one of you will be reading and speaking to one of the sub-findings. So in service of time, I will go ahead and invite Aiden to speak to finding 1.1.
Yeah, finding 1.1, we're talking about how infrastructure anchors collective giving in trusted host institutions to provide relational stability and community. What that really means is it gives our giving circles someone to build a relationship, someone to build trust in. Oftentimes, the giving circles that we work with, again, being identity based. Some of these groups have often been left out of the conversation with institutions like ours, and so we want to make sure that we build those trusts, build those relationships to build up that community. And they also enjoy being with a host like the Arizona Community Foundation, because that offers an institution that provides the administrative support. And again, not only the day-to-day support, but also building relationships with each other within the giving circles, relationships with other giving circles within the Arizona Community Foundation network of Philanthropy for All, but also relationships with some of our other donors and fund holders as well, through events, through shared grant cycles, and through fundraising events and grant making. All that is possible because we have the infrastructure set in place to be able to connect them together. All this allows them to grow in their fundraising, which in return helps with their growing their grant making and the community building and supporting the communities that they serve. A really great example that we have is our Black Philanthropy Initiative, who it was the first giving circle at the Arizona Community Foundation, founded in 2008. Had the largest gala this past year. So previous year, just for perspective, we had about 300 attendees with $150,000 raised at a gala. And this year, this past February, they had over 450 people and more than $550,000 raised. Again, making it the largest fundraising year in their history. And what's great about it is they have had larger donations in the past, but this was community based. It wasn't one individual. It was really from the Black community in Arizona coming together for this gala and event and being able to make those donations and making it the largest fundraising event of the year. And that was possible because of the support that we were able to provide in the event planning, the coordination, and ensuring that we had the right people in the room to be able to make that happen. And so I hope these, are some good is a good example of how these relational and operational infrastructures are important to our giving circles. And so, Emily, I kind of want to turn over to you for the platform role and what technology makes possible.
Great, thanks, Aiden. So I see the role of technology platforms in this sector as one that makes participation easier and more sustainable, and also makes visibility and growth easier as well. If you think about it, giving circles are a simple, intuitive concept, right? I don't know if any of you have tried to explain a giving circle to someone, but typically when I do, they go, oh, yeah, that makes so much sense. Why am I not in one of these? Why haven't I heard of this? I think that the response to that is, well, because there's actually a lot of friction behind it. It's a simple concept. It makes a lot of sense. But when you think about the details, you quickly realize it's a lot of work, right? Organizing all of those people, pooling money, handling money at all, let alone sending charitable tax receipts, coordinating with everyone, times to meet, coordinating a decision across your entire group, whether you're 10 people or 100 people or more, that takes a lot of effort. And so that's where we see Grapevine and platforms generally coming in. Our role is to reduce friction, to really help grow, support, and sustain the movement. And through our work, it's possible when anyone is ready to just do it, and just take action and get involved. You can start your giving circle in 2 minutes and start collecting donations and inviting your members in, right? Previously, that could take weeks, if not months, of setting up bank accounts and of setting up all the infrastructure and the tools and the software, the communication pieces to enable that. So that is one key element. The other one is, it's very easy now to find and join a group. So you can go to Grapevine, you can search for groups, you can learn a lot more about them, and you can click to join right there. So we really just try to reduce that friction. And through this work, we increase visibility and accessibility. What we've seen with Grapevine is that we're seeing even more younger generations and just a broader diversity of people getting involved in the movement. And we believe a big part of that is the visibility and the accessibility. We also increase the credibility of giving circles and the trust. We've heard this so many times from giving circle leaders where, they're asking people to join this group of people who are pooling money. And if you don't have a clear space or methodology or, place for that to happen, that can feel a little, maybe it's a little difficult to explain. People don't quite get it. But by having a clear place and tool that is being used and that is very transparent, that really helps giving circles to build that trust and grow their groups. So overall, we're reducing friction around all of those elements of getting started and getting involved. And in addition to that, we also really reduce friction around participation and sustainability. So with easy online engagement, members, even if they miss that next in-person experience, they have the opportunity to connect and stay up to date through the online tool. They have the ability to connect with other members. We have asked tens of thousands of members who have joined giving circles, why are you joining this giving circle? The most often, the most frequent answer to that question is to connect with other like-minded and like-hearted people. To amplify my impact is a close second, but it's still a close second, right? So making sure that we're creating that space for people to connect is really important, and that can take a lot of effort from giving circle leaders. So we really try to provide additional channels for that and make it really easy for those leaders and members to connect in between whatever in-person events they're organizing. And finally, I'll just note on the sustainability side, when we talk to giving circles, the biggest challenge we hear them cite is chasing checks. If you're in the giving circle movement, you know what I'm talking about. This is a term that everyone uses, right? Even though those members want to donate, they forget. They've misplaced their checkbook. They'll get back to it, whatever it is. And so that is one of the significant values here. Chasing checks can really reduce that leader joy in organizing these groups, right? They become an administrator, a fundraiser. That's not fun. What we found in looking at our data in 2025 is that 73% of new donations on Grapevine are set up to recur. 73%. So right there, you don't have to worry about those 73%, right? And the other is we have easy tools to make it very simple for you to send those quick updates and prompt those members to get their donations in. The second thing that I'll note about sustainability is that one of the biggest risk points we see with giving circles is that moment of leadership transition. Often it's 3 to 4 years in when a leader decides to transition. And if that leader has gone to Herculean efforts to organize and manage this group, maybe they're willing to do it, but often they're not able to find someone else willing to do that. But if you have a platform where everything lives and it's just an easy toggle to bring another person in to be a leader and everything is simple and there's a lot of automation there, it makes that transition moment much easier to manage. And we've heard that from so many giving circle leaders who have successfully navigated those transitions with using those tools. So just wanted to share a couple of those key insights that we're seeing from giving circles and the work of actually organizing these groups and how platforms can really help make that easier for them both to get started and sustain and grow over time. So with that, I'll pass it over to my colleague Sierra to talk more about the network perspective.
Thank you again, Emily. Okay, so let's talk about networks. And here we see that infrastructure strengthens field-wide networks that connect circles and spread shared learning across the movement. So here's how I want you to think about it. An SVP affiliate or another host of another network in my hometown of Tucson, Arizona, can access the best ideas, best practices, tools, and the innovations that are being developed in Portland or Boston or Dallas, or even in our case, Mumbai, Tokyo, or Toronto. And so instead of every community starting from scratch, networks allow communities to learn from one another, to take what's working in other communities and adapt it to what works in theirs, and to move faster towards impact. And so one of the things that we see as a part of a global network is that collective giving is deeply local. In fact, this body of research is named Rooted in Community. And networks allow those local efforts to learn from one another, to scale ideas, to become a part of something that's much bigger. And so we see that people typically join because of a local connection, because of local impact. Emily just mentioned, because they want to be with like-minded people and make difference in their own community. But what happens over time is that they begin to see themselves as a part of something even bigger. A broader global community of people who are learning and giving and volunteering and working together to create change. And so while this body of research is US-based, at SVPI, and I think our other global networks, we see that these patterns are not unique to the US. Across our affiliates in India, Japan, and Canada, we see that people are searching for the exact same things: connection and purpose and belonging, and meaningful ways that they can contribute to their communities. And so networks create extra capacity and extra impact. That is what all of this infrastructure does. And across our SVP network, we see that 72% of our members increase their charitable giving after engaging with SVP. So in addition to what they're giving to the SVP giving circle, they are giving more. And so that's translating into very real community impact. And for every $1 that's granted through an SVP affiliate, through this kind of collective giving pooled funding model, we are mobilizing an additional $30 in direct giving from our members to the nonprofits. And so that is one of the powers of collective giving, but it's not just pooled resources and it's not just extra money, which are incredibly important, but it's that expanded generosity. And so networks really ensure that all of these local groups are not working alone, that they're a part of something much bigger than themselves. And I think that realization can be one of the most powerful catalysts for both individual and collective action. I have a lot more I'd like to share on this, but I know we have a limited time, so I am going to pass it back to you, Michael.
Thanks so much, Sarah. The next finding for me is perhaps the most exciting, and that is how infrastructure expands access and broadens participation. And I think it's safe to say we really see this as the collective giving movement's great contribution to democracy, wherever you find your giving circle. And I just want to point out one example. If you've been looking at the chat like I have, there was someone who raised his hand and said, "I want to get connected to an LGBTQ giving circle in Chicago." And people from Chicago responded and said, "I know about this one. I know about that one. Chicago Community Trust sponsors one." And I threw in the chat a directory, a global directory of giving circles that is run by a collaboration between Philanthropy Together and Grapevine. And so we've just witnessed and seen how these social connections reduces friction, as Emily said, and connects people. And I'm not going to go through each of these important findings myself, but I'd like to call on some of our colleagues so that they can reflect on how their particular aspects of infrastructure do that work. So I'd like to start off with Aidan, if you could chime in about one of these sub-findings.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it would have to be the inclusivity piece. At the Arizona Community Foundation, our 10 giving circles, again, are identity-based, with 4 of them being Black-led giving circles, 2 Asian giving circles, 2 Latino giving circles, an Indigenous and an LGBTQ giving circle as well. And what that means to us means that these people are because of these giving circles, able to feel included, not only in philanthropy, but in the decision-making process as to where dollars go into their communities. With our Indigenous giving circle, it offers even more of a sense of self-determination within their communities, knowing that they are supporting organizations that are supporting their communities, doing the work that they see that is needed in their communities.
Thanks so much, Aidan. Sarah, can you chime in about how SVP expands access and broadens participation?
Yes. Let me get myself off mute here. Okay, hold on. Am I unmuted?
Yep.
Okay, sorry. There's a screen saying I need to unmute myself, even though I did. So, there's a lot of things that collective giving does, but one of the things I think a lot about is that collective giving creates citizens, not just donors, right? The dollars matter. And it's incredibly important to recognize that. I mean, I think you said it was $3.1 billion that's being moved through collective giving. And that's incredibly important to create the social change that we want. But what excites me the most is what happens to the people who are participating. And it's kind of this unintended outcome, or at least they don't see it when they join. But what happens is that they're building these relationships across differences. They're learning from nonprofit and community leaders that they don't typically have access to. They're gaining confidence in their ability to contribute and make a difference. And so they really develop a deeper sense of belonging, a deeper sense of responsibility to place into the world. And it helps communities kind of tap into their own wisdom while connecting people to a broader movement of civic participation at a time when we're seeing significant decline. So I think about it this way, like the grant that's given out may last a year, it may last multiple years, which is even better. But the habits of participation, of trust, of leadership, and of community engagement actually really last a lifetime.
Can I
That's
jump in here?
yep.
Sorry, because maybe because I'm such an SUPI and Sierra fan, but it also is related to one of the questions that we got in the chat. And so we keep saying movement. They're like, is it movement or is it a giving trend? And you nailed it, Sierra, because yes, it's a mechanism in which we are giving, but what is happening is that it is changing how people understand themselves and how they relate to money, to community, to power. It is moving people from being passive supporters of good work to active change agents and partners of those doing the work. And I think that it is helping us to make decisions together in a way that is helping us to disagree better, to agree better, to be able to live a future that we want into existence in how we give. And I think that that's super important, and why I consider it more of a movement than a giving trend, because the issues can be different. The collective giving groups can be varied, but the impact that it has on who shows up and for what, that doesn't change. So sorry, I just wanted to jump in there, but I'll hand it back to Michael.
I think you're witnessing the excitement that this movement and participation and the connection generates in the people on this call, and the liveliness of the chat. It's wonderful to be a part of this. Emily, do you want to bring us home and share some thoughts on this third finding about expanding access and participation?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. I love this conversation. I think we often talk about the people engaged and the money moved and the nonprofits supported as, key to the impact definition of this movement. And it is, and of course, also where the money's going, right? The smaller, more local, often underfunded organizations. And that is key to this whole movement. And what Sierra and Adriana just brought up around, the impact of this movement on the members themselves, right? It's not just about the money moving and the organizations and what they do with this, it's about the members. And one thing I've been spending some more time on is looking into some of the research around this connecting across lines of difference and belonging and what people are looking for. And there's a great report from More in Common, the Connection Opportunity Report, where they found that 71% of people surveyed believe that we have more in common than what divides us, and they want to connect across lines of difference. They also found 66% of Americans, they prefer to connect with others through structured activities. And so when we think about a giving circle as a kind of semi-structured activity, right? What we've also seen is that, just like I shared earlier, when we asked tens of thousands of people why they've joined to connect with other people. They see this almost as a filter for other like-minded, like-hearted people, a great way to connect across lines of difference, but also find alignment, around that shared humanity and desire to give back. So I think that this is some of the most powerful part of this work, ultimately, that we are just starting to shine a brighter light on. And I think in the general context in which we're living right now, it's especially important. So those are my thoughts. I'll pass it back to you, Michael.
Thanks, Emily. And certainly, if you look at things like the Generosity Commission report that came out a couple years ago that lift up collective giving and community foundations as important aspects of connection. If you look at the report from the former Surgeon General on the loneliness epidemic, it just seems to me that collective giving circles are just a marvelous way to address so many ills in our society, starting with connectivity. And so with that, I believe I will pass it over to my friend Isis.
Thank you, Michael. And thank you, everybody, for being on this call today. I'm going to try to close us out just to reflect a little bit on this final finding as well. I think the main theme that we're all trying to share here is that infrastructure is so often invisible, but it really is what makes this work happen, right? Yes, anyone can create a giving circle on their own without touching one of our organizations. But if we're really looking to expand this to potentially millions of people all around the world engaging in this way, you need to be able to have that infrastructure at the core. We love using this metaphor at Philanthropy Together around a coral reef. It's not infrastructure that's the pipes and the sort of the concrete and the dead and the gray. This is about a vibrant, thriving ecosystem at play. All of us here on the call, we are that coral reef. It's alive, but it's enabling all these different species and fish to come together and, be in the same ecosystem and really move more dollars out the door. And as all of us have been saying, the research shows that it's not just about the money, but it's also how it changes individuals. And at a time where I think we're all looking for different ways to just change how money's flowing, who's involved, where that's ultimately heading, I think this is such an impactful way to be able to do that. Some of you have been asking, how do we spread the message about this more? There's so many resources. I would point you to this website that we built called whatisagivingcircle.com as a way to just easily share what does it even mean to do this work. If you're trying to explain it out to somebody, watch the TED Talk, look at the directory, find an example giving circle on Grapevine as an sort of a moment of inspiration. Look into one of the many, many networks like SVP and Ciara. Thank you for your work. There are about 15 or 20 other giving circle networks. Latino Community Foundation, Philanos, that's a network of women's giving circles, Community Investment Network, a network of people of color-led giving circle. There's so many different groups doing this work. And then there's dozens and dozens of community foundations and other host organizations like Aiden and your work at the Arizona Community Foundation, who are really the nuts and bolts hosting and providing that facilitation space. Somebody asked in the chat whether this work is better done in person or virtual. There's pros and cons to both models, but the community foundations are wonderful hosts for all of those doing local work. So thank you to all of our speakers here today. I hope everyone really enjoyed this webinar. We'll put the link to the research again in the chat, and I would just suggest that everybody reads all 3 pieces because they really are the arc of what we know about this work and this ecosystem in this moment, how big it is, how it impacts members, a little bit of an analysis of all the different kinds of collective giving groups, the typology that I was able to help co-author with Michael, and then now looking at this invisible infrastructure as well. Thank you, Michael and Adriana, so much for being our core researchers on this effort and leading us through this webinar. And I'll pass it to Adriana for final closing.
Thank you so much. I am so excited for all of the sharings and wisdoms that we were able to put together today. But more than anything, just the chat and the questions are wonderful to see us trying to grapple with this together. I will say in closing, and if you don't mind moving to the next slide, Ilyasa, the report also lands with opportunities. And we do see so many opportunities that we can all play. Like, it takes all of us, the diversity that's in the room here and within the movement of like voices, but also of perspectives and actors. And so what can leaders do? What can funders do? What can those who advocate for this movement do? Like each actor is going to have some recommendations for what is ahead. And so big picture, we hope that we are able to strengthen the connective tissue of this ecosystem. We are stronger together. It is much more possible to create change, to grow this movement, to sustain it, to keep it alive and thriving if we work together. If there is a diversity of groups in the room, if everybody has a pathway that lets them in, that will be stronger for the movement. The second thing is we need to fortify the systems that grow our legitimacy and our visibility, right? So where we can be aligning on messaging, on outcomes, on joint storytelling efforts. I know I'm really excited. The SVPI is working on an op-ed project to get us all writing op-eds. Like, how are we sharing voices out there that change the narrative around who is a philanthropist and who is this movement for? And then, of course, lowering the barriers and expanding participation. I want it to be super easy to join a giving circle in your community. I want you to see this as a tool in your democratic toolbox. And I want us all to see that we have a place in changing our community together. And so I just want to close out by saying, I hope you see how collective giving is an antidote to so many of the challenges that we're facing. We often hear that we're in a polycrisis, and that is accurate. We do not live issue-based lives, right? And there is an opportunity to be thinking about how we grow this movement intentionally so that it stays rooted in community, but it is a root system that is thriving, that is well nourished with soil that really helps us to grow and sustain this. And I know that we see this at the SVP model, but it exists in all giving circles and in all collective giving. There is value beyond the dollar moved and the people moved and the organization supported. The culture change that is happening and how we show up as philanthropists changes our local context. And that's incredibly important. And so I just want to name and underscore that there is an entire ecosystem behind it. And it is running on shoestring budgets, and it is often volunteer based, and it is often done over kitchen tables, and it is worthy of investment, and it is worthy of investment on all of our levels. From, whatever we pay to our hosts, to, like dues to our networks, to funders who are considering this in their grant portfolios. It is a movement and an infrastructure that is worth investing in. And so thank you all for helping us beat that drum as much as possible. We want to see you all thriving and well-resourced. So thank you all. Thank you for joining us today. And with that, I think that's the end of that's the end of the show. Stay connected. Thank you for sharing this. Ilyasa, here are our websites. And I look forward to responding to the Q&A as well.